July 30th, 1945, 00:15 hours, Philippine Sea. Captain Charles Butler McVeigh III stands on the bridge of USS Indianapolis, reviewing the night's navigation charts as his heavy cruiser cuts through calm seas at 17 knots. Indianapolis is 4 days from Leyte Gulf, returning from the most secret mission of the Pacific War. 10 days ago, McVeigh's ship delivered components of the atomic bomb to Tinian Island, the bomb that will be dropped on Hiroshima in 1 week. The mission was so classified that even McVeigh didn't know what he was carrying until after delivery. Now Indianapolis is sailing alone, unescorted, through enemy waters. Alone because Navy doctrine says a cruiser traveling at 17 knots doesn't need escort. Submarines can't catch ships moving that fast. Alone because Indianapolis is between assignments, not important enough for convoy protection. Alone because this is July 1945. And the Navy believes Japanese submarine threat is minimal after 3 years of devastating anti-submarine warfare. At 14 hours, lookout 3rd Class Harold Schechter sees something in the water 100 yards off the starboard bow, a phosphorescent trail moving toward the ship at high speed. He opens his mouth to shout a warning. At 15 hours, before Schechter can speak, 2 Type 95 torpedoes fired from Japanese submarine I-58 slam into Indianapolis' starboard side. The first torpedo hits forward, near the bow, detonating beneath the ship's number 1 turret. The explosion is catastrophic. The bow, everything forward of frame 20, simply disintegrates. 35 men sleeping in forward compartments die instantly, vaporized by the explosion or drowned as the ocean floods in. The second torpedo hits amidships, striking fuel tanks and ammunition magazines. The explosion ruptures the cruiser's keel, breaking her back structurally. It also destroys all electrical power, all communications, and all firefighting capability. Indianapolis, a 610-foot heavy cruiser displacing 9,800 tons, is mortally wounded, and Captain McVeigh has exactly 12 minutes to save 196 men. The secret mission. To understand why Indianapolis was alone in enemy waters, we need to go back 10 days. July 16, 1945, Mare Island Naval Shipyard, California. USS Indianapolis receives orders to proceed at maximum speed to Tinian Island in the Marianas. Her cargo, a 15-foot wooden crate weighing 300 pounds, and a lead cylinder weighing 200 pounds. The cargo is loaded under armed guard. Marines surround the ship. No crew member is told what's in the crate. Even Captain McVeigh isn't briefed on the cargo's nature, only that failure to deliver it on schedule could cost America thousands of lives. What McVeigh doesn't know, the wooden crate contains the uranium-235 projectile for Little Boy, the atomic bomb that will destroy Hiroshima. The lead cylinder contains uranium-235 target rings. These components represent years of work by the Manhattan Project, and the only weapon-grade uranium America has produced. If this cargo is lost, the atomic bomb cannot be completed for months. The war will continue. Hundreds of thousands more will die, Japanese and American, in the planned invasion of Japan's home islands. Indianapolis makes the crossing from San Francisco to Tinian in 10 days, a new speed record. She arrives July 26th, delivers her cargo, and immediately receives new orders. Proceed to Guam for resupply, then to Leyte Gulf in the Philippines, where Indianapolis will rejoin the fleet for training operations before the planned invasion of Japan. The route from Guam to Leyte crosses 1,100 miles of open ocean. Standard procedure would be to provide destroyer escort for a heavy cruiser making this transit. But Indianapolis is between missions. She's not carrying important cargo anymore, not part of an active operation, just repositioning. The Navy's routing officer at Guam, Lieutenant Joseph Waldron, plots Indianapolis's course and determines she doesn't require escort. His reasoning, Indianapolis can make 17 knots, faster than Japanese submarines can pursue. Enemy submarine activity in the Philippine Sea has been minimal for months. Most Japanese subs have been sunk or are operating near Japan's home waters. The war is almost over anyway. Japan is clearly defeated, just negotiating surrender terms. What Waldron doesn't know, Japanese submarine I-58, commanded by Lieutenant Commander Mochitsura Hashimoto, is patrolling exactly along Indianapolis's planned route. I-58 has been at sea for 3 weeks, hunting American ships, and hasn't found any targets. Hashimoto is frustrated, running low on fuel, preparing to return to base. On July 29th, one day before Indianapolis arrives, Hashimoto repositions I-58 slightly north, hoping to intercept American traffic between Guam and Leyte. Pure chance. If I-58 had been 20 miles north or south, Indianapolis would have passed safely. If Indianapolis had sailed one day earlier or later, she would have missed I-58 completely. But timing and positioning aligned perfectly for catastrophe. Into the water, 00:15 hours, July 30th. The torpedoes hit. Captain McVeigh, thrown across the bridge by the first explosion, regains his feet and immediately assesses the damage. No power. The bridge instruments are dead. Compass dark, radio silent. No communications. The internal phone system is destroyed. Reports coming by messenger from below. Forward compartments flooding. Fires amidships. Ship listing 10 degrees to starboard and increasing. McVeigh gives the only order possible. Abandon ship. Pass the word by messenger to abandon ship. But passing the word is nearly impossible. The ship's intercom is dead. Messengers must physically run through smoke-filled passageways to relay orders. Many compartments are already sealed by flooding or fire. Men trapped inside never receive the abandoned ship order. They die in the darkness, not knowing their ship is sinking. On the main deck, sailors scramble to launch life rafts and deploy life jackets. But Indianapolis is sinking so quickly that normal abandoned ship procedures don't work. Life rafts stored on the port side, the high side as the ship lists to starboard, can't be moved because they weigh hundreds of pounds, and the list makes them impossible to push uphill. Life rafts on the starboard side, the low side, slide into the water on their own, but many break free and drift away before sailors can board them. The life jacket lockers, positioned throughout the ship, are supposed to hold enough jackets for the entire crew, but many lockers are in flooded compartments, inaccessible. Some sailors put on jackets correctly, strapping them tight, following training. Others panic and put them on wrong, loose straps, upside down, which will kill them later when the jackets slip off in the water. Still others have no time to find jackets at all. At 27 hours, exactly 12 minutes after the first torpedo hit, USS Indianapolis rolls completely onto her starboard side. Her propellers lift out of the water, still spinning. Then her bow, what's left of it, slips beneath the surface. The stern rises vertically into the night sky. For a moment, perhaps 5 seconds, the great ship hangs suspended, vertical, her stern 150 feet in the air. Then she slides backward into the Philippine Sea. The suction pulls down anyone swimming nearby. The displaced water creates a wave that washes over rafts and swimmers. And then Indianapolis is gone, 12 minutes from torpedo strike to total loss. In the water, approximately 900 men struggle to stay alive. About 300 died in the explosions, fires, or flooding before the ship sank. The survivors, wounded, exhausted, many burned or injured, face a new horror. They are alone in the open ocean. No distress signal was sent, the radio room was destroyed too quickly, no rescue is coming, because nobody knows Indianapolis sank. They are 250 miles from the nearest land. And it's just past midnight on a moonless night. The first night, 11/20/1840. Seaman Second Class Michael Harper treads water in total darkness, wearing a Kapok life jacket that's already waterlogged and losing buoyancy. He can hear voices nearby, other survivors calling out, asking if anyone knows what happened, looking for friends. Someone is screaming, badly burned, in shock, begging for help that nobody can provide. Harper's arm is broken. He felt it snap when the second torpedo threw him against a bulkhead. His ribs hurt when he breathes, possibly cracked from the explosion's concussion. But he's alive, conscious, and thinking clearly enough to know he needs to find other survivors. Alone in the ocean, a man dies quickly, from exhaustion swimming, from hypothermia as body heat dissipates, from the psychological terror of isolation. In groups, men encourage each other, share resources, and survive longer. Harper swims toward the nearest voices. Over the next hour, survivors cluster into groups. The largest group, maybe 400 men, forms around a cluster of life rafts and floater nets that deployed properly from Indianapolis before she sank. This group includes the ship's senior medical officer, Dr. Lewis Haynes, who begins organizing wounded treatment despite having no medical supplies except what men carried in their pockets. A second group, about 150 men, forms around Ensign Harlan Twible, who finds himself senior officer of survivors who have no rafts, only life jackets. They create a floating formation, linking arms to stay together in the darkness. A third group, perhaps 100 men, clusters near the ship's executive officer, Commander Joseph Flynn, who has 2 rafts and begins organizing rationing of the limited supplies. A few tins of Spam, crackers that are already waterlogged and dissolving, and 2 small kegs of fresh water. Dozens of smaller groups, 5 to 20 men each, float separately, either unable to find the larger groups in the darkness or too injured to swim the distance. And perhaps 100 men float alone, separated from others by distance, unconscious from injuries, or simply unlucky in where they entered the water. As dawn breaks on July 30th, the survivors can finally see each other and assess their situation. The view is terrifying. Ocean in every direction to the horizon. No land visible, no ships visible, no aircraft visible, just water, and approximately 900 men in it. The Philippine Sea in summer is relatively warm, 84 degrees Fahrenheit, which means hypothermia won't kill quickly. But 84-degree water still leaches body heat faster than the human body can generate it. After 24 hours in water, this temperature, even strong swimmers begin experiencing hypothermia symptoms. Shivering, confusion, loss of coordination. After 48 hours, many will die. The survivors don't know this yet. They believe rescue will come within hours. Indianapolis is a major warship, men tell each other. When she doesn't arrive at Leyte on schedule, they'll send searchers. We'll be picked up by tomorrow. They're wrong. Nobody is looking for them. Because Indianapolis's mission was classified and her route was routine, Navy Command at Leyte doesn't expect her for another 2 days. When she doesn't arrive on schedule, they'll assume she was delayed. Mechanical problems, weather, diverted for another mission. Standard procedure says to wait 48 hours before declaring a ship overdue. After 48 hours, they'll send a query to other commands asking if anyone knows Indianapolis's location. The query will bounce between commands for another 24 hours before someone decides to launch search aircraft. By then, the survivors will have been in the water for 3 days. Many will be dead, and the sharks will have arrived. The sharks arrive 1840-2650. The first shark appears late morning on July 30th, about 10 hours after Indianapolis sank. Marine Private First Class Giles McCoy is floating with his group when he sees a gray shape pass beneath him, perhaps 6 feet down. At first, he thinks it's debris, a piece of the ship, a floating fuel drum. Then it turns, and McCoy sees the distinctive silhouette, streamlined body, high dorsal fin, long pectoral fins, an oceanic white-tip shark, Carcharinus longimanus, average length 10-12 feet, weight 300-400 pounds, temperament aggressive, curious, territorial, habitat open ocean, tropical waters, exactly like the Philippine Sea. Feeding behavior, opportunistic, will investigate any potential food source, including floating debris, wounded fish, and men. The oceanic whitetip is considered one of the most dangerous sharks to shipwreck survivors. Not because it's the largest, great whites and tiger sharks are bigger. Not because it's the fastest, makos and blue sharks are faster. But because oceanic whitetips live in open ocean, far from land, where shipwreck survivors end up. And because they're persistent. Jacques Cousteau called the oceanic whitetip the most dangerous of all sharks. McCoy watches the shark circle his group once, twice, 3 times. Each pass brings it closer to the surface. On the 4th pass, it bumps a sailor floating at the edge of the group. Testing, investigating, determining if this floating object is edible. The sailor screams and thrashes, pulling his legs up, trying to make himself smaller. The shark circles away. For now. Over the next few hours, more sharks arrive, drawn by vibrations in the water, the splashing and movement of 900 men. Drawn by blood, many survivors have wounds that leak blood into the ocean. Drawn by chemical signals, human sweat and urine create a scent trail that sharks can detect from miles away. By evening of the first day, dozens of sharks circle the survivor groups. They don't attack yet, not in coordinated feeding. but they investigate. Individual sharks make passes at groups, testing, bumping men with their snouts, sometimes seizing limbs in exploratory bites before releasing. Dr. Haynes, trying to treat wounded men, watches helplessly as sharks circle his group. "I saw a shark take a man about 20 feet from me," Haynes would later testify. "He was floating alone, separated from our group. The shark came up from below, very fast. The man screamed once, then he was pulled under. He didn't resurface." By the second day, July 31st, the sharks have become bolder. They've learned that these floating objects are food. They've learned that wounded men floating alone are easier targets than men in groups. And they have learned that the men are helpless. They can't fight back, can't escape, can only scream and die. The attacks begin in earnest. Sharks cruise through the survivor. Groups selecting targets, usually men floating at the edges, or men who've become separated, or men who are wounded and bleeding. The attacks are swift and brutal. A shark approaches from below, unseen in the murky water. It strikes upward, seizing the victim's leg or torso in jaws lined with serrated teeth. The victim screams, a sound that echoes across the water, terrifying the other survivors. The shark pulls the victim underwater. Sometimes the victim resurfaces briefly, struggling, screaming for help that nobody can provide. Sometimes he doesn't resurface at all. Within seconds, other sharks converge on the site, drawn by blood in the water, feeding frenzy. The men in groups can do nothing except watch. They try to stay close together, making themselves larger and more intimidating to sharks. They splash and shout when sharks approach, trying to scare them away. Sometimes it works. Sharks are cautious predators, and loud noise sometimes drives them off. Sometimes it doesn't, and men disappear into the depths. Would you stay with a large group where you're safer, but watch friends die, or risk floating alone? Tell me in the comments. Delirium and death, 2650-3415. By the third day, August 1st, the sharks are not the only threat. Dehydration is killing men as surely as the ocean's predators. The human body needs fresh water to survive. In normal conditions, a person can survive perhaps 3 days without water before dehydration causes organ failure. But these aren't normal conditions. The survivors are immersed in salt water, which leaches moisture from the skin through osmosis. They're exposed to tropical sun during the day, which causes excessive sweating and fluid loss. They're constantly swimming or treading water, which accelerates dehydration. And they're surrounded by water they cannot drink. Drinking seawater is fatal. Seawater contains about 3.5% salt, roughly 4 times the concentration the human kidney can process. When someone drinks seawater, their body attempts to dilute the salt by pulling water from cells and tissues. This causes extreme thirst, so the person drinks more seawater, which causes more cellular dehydration, which causes more thirst. A death spiral. After drinking seawater for several hours, victims experience extreme thirst despite drinking, confusion and disorientation, hallucinations, seizures, organ failure, death. On day 3, many survivors begin drinking sea britter. They know they shouldn't. They were trained not to, but the thirst is unbearable, and the ocean is right there, and the hallucinations tell them it will be okay. Seaman Harper watches as a sailor from his group suddenly announces, "There's fresh water down there, below the salt layer. I'm going to get some." The sailor dives beneath the surface. He doesn't come back up. Harper waits 2 minutes, then dives down looking for him. He finds nothing. The sailor has drowned, either from disorientation or from a shark that took him in the depths. The hallucinations become worse as dehydration progresses. Men see ships on the horizon, rescue vessels that don't exist. They see Indianapolis floating nearby, intact, undamaged, waiting for them to swim back aboard. They see islands in the distance, palm trees, beaches, fresh water, just a mile away. Some men begin swimming toward these hallucinations, convinced they're real. They swim until exhaustion overcomes them. Then they drown. Others experience different delusions. They believe they're back home. They carry on conversations with family members who aren't there. They remove their life jackets because they think they're in a swimming pool, not the ocean. Without life jackets, they sink and drown within minutes. Dr. Haynes, himself severely dehydrated and beginning to hallucinate, tries to maintain order in his group. "Don't drink the water," he tells men repeatedly. "Don't remove your life jackets. Stay together. Rescue is coming." but he's no longer sure if rescue is coming. It's been 3 days. If the Navy knew Indianapolis sank, searchers would have found them by now, which means either the Navy doesn't know, or they know and can't find the survivors, or nobody is looking. On the evening of August the 2nd, day 4 in the water, Haynes counts his group. Yesterday there were 400 men. Today there are less than 200. Half died overnight. From dehydration, from drowning, from sharks, from simply giving up. The ocean is littered with bodies, men who died in their life jackets, floating face down, bobbing in the swells. Some groups try to bury their dead, pushing bodies away from the group so they won't attract more sharks. Other groups are too exhausted to care. The dead float among the living. That night, Haynes prays for the first time since he was a child, not for himself. He's accepted that he'll probably die in this ocean, but for his men. For the 200 who remain in his group. For some miracle that will bring rescue before they all die. The miracle comes at 10:20 a.m. on August 3rd. Rescue at last. Lieutenant Wilbur Gwynn pilots a PV-1 Ventura patrol bomber on a routine anti-submarine sweep 250 miles northwest of Leyte. His mission? Search for Japanese submarines, report any contacts, return to base. Standard patrol. He's flown this route dozens of times without seeing anything. At 10:20 a.m., Gwynn's radio antenna breaks, a mechanical failure that has nothing to do with the mission. Standard procedure would be to continue the patrol with the broken antenna and fix it after landing. But Gwynn is bored, and fixing the antenna will give his crew something to do, so he orders them to extend the antenna and attempt repairs in flight. To extend the antenna properly, Gwynn needs to descend to lower altitude and slow his airspeed. He drops from 5,000 feet to 1,000 feet. At 1,000 feet, Gwynn's bombardier, looking down at the ocean through the Ventura's nose windows, sees something unusual. An oil slick on the water, long, dark, stretching for miles. Oil slicks can indicate a submarine, either one that's been damaged or one that's intentionally leaking oil to create a false trail. Gwynn follows the oil slick, descending to 800 feet for a better look. That's when he sees them. Heads in the water, dozens of heads, then hundreds, spread across square miles of ocean. "What the hell is that?" Gwynn says aloud. His co-pilot thinks they're sea turtles or dolphins at first, but as the Ventura circles lower, they realize they're looking at men. Hundreds of men, in life jackets, floating in the open ocean. Gwynn immediately radios his base. Many survivors in water, position 1111°30 N, 150°30 E, need immediate rescue. Within 20 minutes, every available rescue aircraft in the region is scrambled. PBY Catalina seaplanes, which can land on water, are diverted to the survivors' position. Destroyers and destroyer escorts are ordered to maximum speed toward the coordinates. Lieutenant Commander Robert Adrian Marks, flying a PBY Catalina, arrives first. Standard procedure says seaplanes shouldn't land in open ocean. The swells are too dangerous. The planes can be damaged, and takeoff after landing is uncertain. Marks looks down at men dying in the water and decides standard procedure can go to hell. He lands his PBY in 12-foot swells, a dangerous, borderline suicidal maneuver. The Catalina bounces, slams into waves, but stays intact. Marks taxes toward the nearest survivors and begins pulling men aboard. PBY Catalinas are designed to carry a crew of 8. Marks pulls 56 survivors aboard, stuffing them into every available space. The cockpit, the gun blisters, the bomb bay, the hull. When there's no more room inside, he lashes survivors to the wings with parachute cord. His PBY is so overloaded, it will never take off again. But Marks doesn't care. He's saving lives. Other rescue aircraft arrive and drop life rafts and supplies. Destroyers USS Doyle and USS Bassett reach the area by evening and begin systematic rescue operations. Searchlights sweep the ocean. Small boats launch from the destroyers, crews pulling survivors and bodies from the water. The rescue operation continues through the night and into August 4th. Final count, 316 survivors rescued. Out of approximately 1,196 men aboard Indianapolis when she sailed. Out of approximately 900 men who entered the water after she sank, 880 dead. The worst loss of life from a single ship in U.S. Navy history. The trial that broke a captain, Captain Charles McVeigh, survived. He was pulled from the Ginner on August 3rd by USS Doyle, dehydrated and suffering from exposure but alive. Most captains who survived their ship's loss would be quietly reassigned, perhaps face a court of inquiry, but not court-martial unless gross negligence was proven. McVeigh was court-martialed. In December 1945, 4 months after Indianapolis sank, the Navy charged McVeigh with failure to zigzag. Navy regulations suggested zigzagging in enemy waters to make ships harder targets for submarines. Failure to order abandoned ship in a timely manner. The prosecution argued McVeigh should have given abandoned ship orders earlier. The court-martial was controversial from the start. First, the Navy had routed Indianapolis through known submarine waters without escort, but no routing officer was charged. Second, no distress signal was sent, but the Navy's communication failures meant nobody noticed Indianapolis was missing for 4 days. Third, the prosecution's star witness was Lieutenant Commander Mochitsura Hashimoto, the Japanese submarine commander who sank Indianapolis. The U.S. Navy flew Hashimoto from Japan to testify against McVeigh. Hashimoto testified that zigzagging would not have saved Indianapolis. His torpedoes would have hit regardless. He testified that McVeigh commanded his ship properly, and the sinking was simply the fortune of war. The court ignored Hashimoto's testimony. McVeigh was found guilty of failure to zigzag and acquitted of the abandoned ship charge. His sentence, a letter of reprimand, effectively ending his naval career. Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz overturned the conviction, stating that McVeigh had performed his duties properly, and the loss of Indianapolis was not due to his negligence. But the damage was done. McVeigh's name was associated with the Navy's worst disaster. He received hate mail from families of dead crewmen, letters blaming him for their sons' deaths. He was passed over for promotion and quietly retired from the Navy in 1949. For the next 19 years, McVeigh lived quietly in Connecticut. He rarely spoke about Indianapolis. He didn't attend crew reunions. He felt his presence would be painful for survivors. He corresponded with some survivors who wrote to him, assuring them he didn't blame them for the court-martial testimony. On November 6, 1968, Captain Charles Butler McVeigh III walked into his backyard holding his Navy service revolver. He shot himself once in the head. He was 70 years old. His suicide note read, "I can't stand the pain any longer." The survivors of Indianapolis, men like Dr. Lewis Haynes, Giles McCoy, and Michael Harper, spent decades advocating for McVeigh's exoneration. They wrote letters to Congress, they testified before committees. They argued that McVeigh was a scapegoat, blamed for a tragedy that resulted from Navy communication failures, not command negligence. In October 2000, 55 years after the sinking, Congress passed a resolution exonerating McVeigh. In July 2001, the Navy Secretary formally apologized, stating, "Captain McVeigh's court-martial was a miscarriage of justice. He is exonerated of any wrongdoing." But McVeigh never knew. He died 32 years before his exoneration. In crisis, should leaders be held responsible for outcomes beyond their control? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Legacy beneath the waves. USS Indianapolis was found in August 2010 by a research vessel funded by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen. She rests on the ocean floor at 18,000 feet depth, over 3 miles down. The wreck is remarkably intact. The bow section that was blown off sits nearby, but the main hull is recognizable. Photos show the ship's propellers, gun turrets, and superstructure preserved in the cold, dark water. The wreck is protected as a war grave. No salvage operations are permitted. No artifacts may be removed. 880 men are entombed in and around that wreck. In 2017, survivors of Indianapolis held their final reunion. Only 19 remained alive, all in their 90s. They met at the National Museum of the Pacific War in Fredericksburg, Texas. They shared stories. They remembered the friends who didn't come home. And they honored Captain McVeigh, the man who saved as many as he could, who was blamed for circumstances beyond his control, and who carried that blame to his grave. Captain McVeigh gave the order to abandon ship, said survivor Edgar Harrell at the reunion. He stayed on the bridge until every man who could be saved was off the ship. Then he went into the water with us. He survived, and they crucified him for it. That's not justice, that's cruelty. The last survivor of USS Indianapolis, Harold Bray, died in September 23. With his death, the the last living witness to those 5 days in the Philippine Sea, is gone, but their story survives. A reminder that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's continuing to fight when everything is lost. That leadership isn't avoiding failure, it's doing your best in impossible circumstances. And that sometimes, the ocean takes everything. July 30th, 1945. 12 minutes from torpedo strike to total loss. 5 days in water that became a graveyard. 316 survivors out of 1,096 men. USS Indianapolis disappeared beneath the Philippine Sea, carrying secrets that would end the war. But she also carried 880 men who would never come home. Their sacrifice wasn't on a battlefield. It was in the slow horror of the open ocean, fighting sharks, dehydration, and the realization that nobody was coming. They died so America could end the war that had killed millions. And they deserve to be remembered not as statistics, but as men who faced the worst death imaginable with courage that inspires us still. These stories of sacrifice, survival, and the cruel randomness of war deserve to be remembered. Subscribe so they never fade into history. Next time, the raid that launched from an impossible place and changed the course of the Pacific War.